you. Thanks. Well, hello everyone. My name is Ferran, as he said, and today I'll talk about the paper that I co-authored with my colleagues Danielle, who's actually in the audience, so feel free to reach out to her if you want to talk about this during the conference, but also Ernő and Katherine. And our paper is a review of the current state of playful human-food interaction research. And for those who haven't heard much about it, human-food interaction, or HFI as we normally talk about it, is the research space that explores the intersection between food, human interaction, and many times technology. A few months ago at CHI, we presented a study of the state of human-food interaction research as a whole. In that study, we saw that this emerging field is super heterogeneous and that it's growing very rapidly. And because of that, we argued that there's a need of ongoing sense-making, both of HFI as a whole, but also of its multiple sub-areas of interest. So that's what we decided to do with this paper, making sense of one of the many subsets of HFI research. In particular, we looked at those works that use play and game-inspired strategies to enhance our interactions with food. We call this subset Playful HFI. There are a number of previous works that in different ways have explored this space before. For example, last year at this very same conference, SIGCHI et al. Coined the term gastroludology, and they reviewed technologies that enhance eating and drinking in playful ways. Similarly, recent work by Wilde et al. Has proposed strategies for designing playful eating technology, and we ourselves have also explored this intersection between play and eating, in this case reviewing the state of playfulness in fine dining restaurants. Though interesting and relevant, all of those works share one common limitation, which is that they mostly focus on food consumption, which is one between the many areas of food lives that we're concerned with. The concept of celebratory technology does overcome that limitation because it proposes alternative and more experience-focused directions for human food interaction in, but also beyond eating and drinking. However, that work is not necessarily a comprehensive review, but more of a mapping out of design opportunities, and most importantly, it doesn't focus on play per se, but more on experience in a general sense. So long story short, we couldn't really find a comprehensive review of playful human food interaction research, and that's why we decided to conduct one. And we began by collecting papers, and we ended up with a data set of 34 publications of very different kinds. Here you can see a summary of what we got. And then we developed a conceptual model to analyze the data, to make sense of what we were observing. And we built on four main criteria. First, we built on our previous study, the conceptual model of our previous study of human food interaction that we presented at CHI a few months ago. Second, we drew from existing theories of play and game design. You can see some of them on the screen. We also looked at the criteria that previous people who did play-related reviews of HCI used. And we finally looked at the papers in our data set and identified some additional coding criteria. And based on all of those inputs, we built our conceptual model, our framework. And as you can see, it has 3 dimensions of analysis: metadata, human food interaction lenses, and play-related concepts. And each of those dimensions is subdivided in a series of lenses that we used as criteria to examine the papers. I'll describe those criteria right now. Let's first have a look at the metadata. This is kind of the easy one. Here we looked at basic stuff like publication date, venue, type of publication, author's keywords. In terms of human food interaction lenses, we focused on 3 main criteria. First, we look at the interplay between the human and the technology and where the agency is placed on that continuum. We also looked at the focus of the research to see what are the motivations behind it, expressed as a continuum again, in this case between functionality, individual experience, and social bonding. And finally, we looked at the areas of food practice explored by the research, which we call domains, including sourcing, storing, producing, eating, tracking, speculating, and reflecting on food. Finally, the third dimension of our model looked at the play-related concepts, because it's a review of playful HFI. And here first we looked at the structure of the play experience. We examined the interventions to see whether they were governed by rules or not, if those rules were robust or more loose, and more generally to see whether the interventions afforded experience that were more constrained or open-ended. Second, we looked at the situatedness. We asked ourselves if and in what ways the playful experiences were meant to actually intertwine with the situated food practice, and trying to understand better this connection between the actual situated food practice and the play activity. And finally, we looked also at the types of play experience afforded by or explored in the research. And here we took the categories in the PLEX framework that I'm sure that many of you will know about as our granular experiential qualities, But to make them more approachable, we clustered them thematically into 5 higher level types of fun that we call experiential textures. So this is the model that we use to analyze the Playful HFI publications in our dataset, and I invite you to read the paper if you'd like more details or to ask questions afterwards. Let me now go to the results to give an overview of what we found. When looking at the metadata, we found that there's a progressive increase in publications per year, which actually matches the trend that we found in our previous study of HFI as a whole. We also saw that a lot of publications in the dataset are partially but not fully developed, either because they lack a robust validation mechanism, such as a user study, or because they do not really present novel or significant or clear findings. We saw a lot of works in progress, for example, that didn't end up concluding into a full study. When looking at the human-food interaction criteria, we found the remarkable dominance of eating and drinking over other domains of food practice, as you can see in the graph. We also saw that most publications either give agency to the human or propose balanced agency between humans and technology, which is actually pretty different from what we found in our earlier study of human-food interaction as a whole, where we saw a clear tendency towards technology automation. And when looking at the focus of the research, we saw that there's a dominance of publications whose goal is to support utilitarian agendas, like teaching people how to have more healthy eating habits, etc., etc. Let's now look at our findings related to play concepts. When looking at the types of play structure, we saw that game-related structures with robust rule sets and boundaries are kind of more common than those that use open-ended play and playfulness. And in terms of situatedness, we saw a pretty equal balance between autotelic, porous, and situated play activities. So there was a nice balance here. But in terms of experiential qualities, we saw clear dominance of hard fun, that is, playful experiences that are based on competition, challenge, thrill, and similar experiences, which are actually types of play that we often find in mainstream video games. And based on those results, I would like to highlight a couple of things, a couple of points that we think can help understand where we are right now in playful human-food interaction. The first one is that we saw that there's a clear focus on eating and drinking, with little consideration of other food domains. We also found a dominant focus on utilitarian agendas, sometimes to the detriment of supporting experience and social bonding. We saw that playful HFI interventions tend to promote user empowerment as opposed to technology automation, which is actually a remarkable difference with HFI research as a whole. We found that playful HFI works often use game-like structures with clear and robust rule sets and tend to focus on affording experiences of hard fun. There's a lot of emphasis on those experiential qualities that I mentioned before, like competition, challenge, task completion, or thrill. And finally, on a more general level, we saw that almost half of playful HFI publications are not fully developed research, which is something that, as a community, we may want to reflect on. Extending recent calls for more critical approaches in HFI, we see a need for exploring more thoroughly the social, cultural implications of augmenting food practices with playful technology. Based on this landscape that we observed, in the paper we propose a series of opportunities for moving forward for future playful HFI research. Here today I will highlight 3 of them that we find particularly important, but please check the paper for more. First, it's pretty clear that we as a community need to start looking beyond eating and drinking to explore how play and playfulness can add value in other areas of our food lives, such as cooking, growing, buying foods, etc. Second, we argue that there's too much focus on the utilitarian potential of play to solve problems. Play can motivate us to eat better, to be more safe when we prepare the food, to learn healthier habits. Yes, but that's not all it can do. Play can also make us happier, bring us joy, to help us connect with others. And while recent works in this space are starting to push for this agenda, our review shows that they are still in the minority. So we argue that playful HFI could explore more the social, the emotional, the cultural potential of play, at least as much as it explores its capacity to support utilitarian agendas. And finally, we argue that there's a need for embracing the diversity of what play and playfulness mean. We've seen a lot of works that propose a very specific kind of play experience, similar to that of stereotypical hard fun-based games. But given the diverse, messy, situated, highly material nature of food practices, we encourage designers and researchers to actually go beyond that, to explore a broader palette of play experiences, but also structures. In a way, we want to do this because we think that will make us more likely to design technologies that respond to the playful cravings of not only just a narrow set of player types, but to a broader set of people and users. And that's all from me today. Thanks for your time, and feel free to shoot questions.
any questions?
Hello, Floyd Müller, Exertion Games Lab, RMIT Melbourne, Australia. Thanks very much for your talk. I kind of, you mentioned several times, so the playful community did this and this and this, unlike our previous work where we looked at human-food interaction in general. Did I hear kind of like an undertone that the play community understands food better than the HCI community?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Danielle Wilde, SDU. I'm a co-first author. You can understand many things from what we're saying, but no, I don't believe our data does not suggest that the play community understands food better in any way whatsoever. In fact, the gaps show that the play community has a very limited understanding of the potential of food, because we eat for a lot of reasons. We eat to survive, to live, and for our physiological well-being, but we also eat for social reasons and for cultural reasons and to stimulate our senses and to enjoy good food and good company. Eating is a very, very complex sociocultural activity, and our data actually demonstrates that the play community who are engaging with HFI have a very, very limited understanding, but that understanding is different. The way it plays out is different to how the human-food interaction community across broader spectrums of computer-human interaction understand or act in this space. So if there are no other questions, maybe I'll just say what we hope our study will do is open up opportunities to reflect on what's possible here, but also to reflect on the fact that with the diverse forms of publications in Playful HFI, there's room to really consider what does this mean? Can you pull up the different...
Yeah.
This one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we have such a range of papers, and as we can see in the data sets that we provide, some of them, there are a lot of works that can be considered unresolved from a research perspective. But what this points out is something we found very interesting in terms of an emerging research area. What does it mean that there are a lot of short experiments and works in progress and sort of works that have a very short life in some ways? From a research perspective, there aren't big studies done. They could almost be considered a gimmick. What does it mean for an emerging research area? Maybe this is really important and can be given a bit more support. Not necessarily support to develop into more complex research projects, but support to exist as ways of experimenting with where more comprehensive research might go and what directions it might go in. And we found this very, very interesting. And it's also present a bit in HFI, but it's really dramatic in Playful HFI. And I think it shows something that the play-oriented community might reflect on, how we can support and leverage this tendency and use it to perhaps strike out new ways of understanding how research can evolve and emerge and grow and establish itself when new fields are arising. Yeah.
Thanks again.
Thank you.